And so then they got to an area near Santa Barbara, and the army men on horseback, etc., were watching them make canoes. They would get flint off of, flint rock, very sharp, and they would dig out these canoes. And they were so good that they called the place Carpinteria. And then they continued on north until they got to a place which we know now as a Hearst Castle. And they were going to go over the mountains. They were following the seashore. And they were going to go right over the mountains where, what they call Big Sur, that area. But they had scouts, which they called explorers. And they would go out 20, 40 miles ahead of the unit and find out the best way to go places. And they decided that they're not going to go over the mountains there. They're going to cut through the mountains and go to a place which is now Salinas. And that's what they did. They brought with them on the boats and the mules all the equipment you can imagine. They had saws of all kinds, two-man saws. They had axes, picks, and they cut their way through so that the cattle, the horses, the men, everything could go. And they went all the way to the Salinas area, and they found this river now known as Salinas River. And they went right down, and they went into Monterey. 160 years earlier, Vizcaíno, famous mariner, found Monterey. He went in. They made maps. They talked. They identified everything in there. But when Portola and the group came there, and they had these records with them, they didn't know whether they were in Monterey or not, especially since the longitude on the old 160-year-old map was different than what they made when they were there. They weren't sure. And Constanzo was an engineer and so forth, and he said, well, you're several degrees off. Maybe we should go further north. Maybe we missed it. And Portola was very democratic. He didn't want to make that decision himself, so he got all the officers together, three fathers, Father Crespi, and they all sat around, and Portola told them all the facts that he had and whether or not this is Monterey or where is it. They decided to go north for a while. So they took off. They came right through a little town I lived in called Corralitos, small corrals. They named it. There's a river that's right near us in Corralitos, and the army men found a large bird on the bank of the river. It was an eagle, stuffed by the Indians, and so they said, pájaro. That means bird. Well, now we have the Pájaro River. We have the Pájaro District School District, and all the other pájaros.
The dunes.
Pájaro dunes. And then they went into, they followed the beach. They went into, by the way, they were only 2 miles from our house with the way they went. We weren't too far. And then they went to the San Lorenzo River, which they named, which is right at the heart of Santa Cruz. They stayed there for a while, and they couldn't find Monterey. They continued and continued, and they got up to Pacifica. And they looked down, and there was a huge bay. Ah, San Francisco. When Father Serra was talking to General Valdez, saying, you know, I want to name some area for our order, Franciscan order. And the general said, well, if you find a place worthy enough for your order, go ahead and name it. Well, that's San Francisco. And at Pacifica, there's a large statue of Portola overlooking on a hill there.
One pointing?
No,
That's
Sarah.
That's
That's inland, yeah.
It's the same statue that is in a major city in Spain. They made a duplicate of it and brought it back. So then they knew this was not Monterey, so they turned around and went back, and they missed Monterey again. They went all the way back to San Diego, but on the way they were starving. They ran out of food. They had to kill some of the mules and eat them. And of course, they had their own butchers and such. And then they went all the way back to San Diego, and the other man who wrote a diary was Villa, V-I-L-A, and he was the captain of the San Carlos. And he knew a great deal about all these things, and I think he also came by Monterey when he went to, he had been by the port. So they discussed it and all that, and he said, you missed it. He said, that you were there. You were absolutely there. So Portola left all the mules behind, left the fathers behind, and had 28 men on horseback, and in just a few days they were back into Monterey and said, this is it. Then Father, well, there's a lot that I haven't told you about, but there's just too much. But anyway, the San Antonio took off from San Diego to go to Monterey, and Father Serra was aboard, and they get to Monterey, and then there's a big dinner and so forth, and after that, they take Portola back to San Blas, Mexico, and he then informs the Galvez, the general, that they've been to San Diego and Monterey, and they put people in there, army and cattle, and they brought seeds for planting all kinds of things. And so this was the end of the expedition. And then there was a notice of this kind of a legal notice, which I have it both in Spanish and English here. You can see it. And so Spain acquired another 800 miles of land. They weren't looking for gold this time. They were looking for land. They were afraid that the Russians or the English would come in and take it instead. So it's a much bigger story than I've told you. I've just told you the skeleton, really. And it's a marvelous story. Let's see what I've missed telling you here.